Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Shabbos, Perek Yud Zayin, chapter 17, Mishnah Ches, Mishnah 8. I dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother. Our learning should be an aliyah and neshama of Shalamis Bas Rav Yaakov Eliezer.
Amen.
Okay, a quick introduction. It is rabbinically forbidden for one to replace the cover of a hole in the ground, for example, a pit or well, because he appears to be making a permanent addition to the ground, which is a biblical malacha of building. So we have one of the 39 avos malachas, 39 forms of forbidden activity is baina, is building. Another one is seiser, demolishing. Now, the only time, as we have been saying until now, that baina is only a problem, according to Torah law, if you're doing something permanent. Right? If you're doing something permanent, that is considered baina. So now, in this case, we have a hole in the ground, and what we're starting off with now, an introduction is you have a hole in the ground, and you put a cover on it. Put a cover on the hole in the ground. So it may very well be that your intention is not for it to be there forever, just a temporary cover. It comes on and off. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily appear that way. A hole in the ground, you put a cover on it, appears like you're putting something permanent to cover the hole. And therefore, midrabanan, according to rabbinic law, it's forbidden to do. Now, were that cover to have a handle on it, so it's obvious that it's there for picking up and putting down, then it'd be permissible. If we would be talking about a cover of a pot, anything wrong with covering a pot on Shabbos? Certainly not baina, certainly not building. And the same thing before, if you have this cover that doesn't have a handle and you're taking it off on Shabbos, that appears like you are demolishing. It appears like you're taking something permanent away from the ground. And it's not necessarily clear that you're going to put it back. And therefore, that would also be forbidden. But once there's a handle on it, even though it's in the ground itself, where that in the ground is where that's where the greatest appearance of doing something permanent is. But if there's a handle, then it's clear that that's not what's going on. If we're talking about a cover, like we said, of a vessel, doesn't have a handle. You don't need a handle, right? On vessels, you don't put on covers permanently. So even if it does have a handle, no problem putting it on, taking it off. Our Mishnah's case is going to be a case where you're covering, you have a pot, you have a, let's say some kind of here's an example, you have a stove. You have a stove, okay? And the stoves in those days had like one opening on top. And there's a cover to it. You want to put a cover on the hole. But the stove is connected to the ground. It's not movable. It's connected to the ground. So the question is, do we say that the same way that a cover without a handle, if you put it on a hole in the ground, rabbinically it's forbidden? Do the rabbis include in that anything connected to the ground? Do we say something? Because in very many places in the Torah, we say if it's connected to the ground, it has the status of the ground. Therefore, the question is, if you have, let's say, a utensil, a vessel, like a stove, but it's attached to the ground, can you then put a cover on the hole in that stove if the cover doesn't have a handle? Is it then considered like you're covering a hole in the ground, which the rabbis forbade? So the Mishnah reads like this: Kol kasuya kelim, all covers of utensils, referring to utensils connected to the ground. Sheish lem beis achiza, if they have a handle, you told them b'Shabbos that you can remove them and move them on. You can put them on, take them off on Shabbos. If it has the handle, it's clear, it's there temporarily. If it doesn't have the handle, then again, although we're talking about an oven where one would argue, perhaps it should be obvious that it's not there forever, but being that it's connected to the ground, that has the status of the ground, and that was also included in the rabbinic prohibition. Rabbi Yaisi said, when do we say that it has to have a handle? B'kisri karka, when it's actually a covering on the ground itself. But if it's a covering for utensils, even though the utensil is, or even when the utensil is connected to the ground, whether it has a cover or it doesn't have a cover, they told them b'Shabbos they can be moved on Shabbos. That is Rabbi Yaisi's opinion, but the halacha is like the Tanna Kama, that we say that if something is connected to the ground, that has the status of the ground, it has to be treated just like the ground, and therefore any cover that's being put on that utensil that is connected to the ground has to have a handle to be able to take it and put it on and remove it, just as what would be if if this cover was covering a hole in the ground itself. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So